Our scripture reading this morning comes from the book of Acts. So when they had come together, that is the disciples, they asked Jesus, this is the risen Jesus, "Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom of Israel?" He replied, "It is not for you to know the time or periods that God has set by God's own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." When he had said this, as they were watching, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. While he was going and they were gazing up towards heaven, suddenly 2 men in white robes stood by them. They said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up toward heaven? This Jesus who's been taken up from you into heaven will come in the very same way you saw him go into heaven." Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olive, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. When they entered the city, they went to the room upstairs where they were staying. Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas, son of James. All these were constantly devoting themselves to prayer, together with certain women, including Mary, the mother of Jesus, as well as his brothers. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God. Well, it's almost stargazing season again. I love going out on warm summer nights to look up at the stars, especially when you can get away from the city lights. I remember one stargazing experience on the top of a hill at an all-church retreat with my previous congregation in California. The Bay Area bustle was hours away, and so the sky was just awash in starlight. There were so many, it almost seemed like a mistake, as if God had spilled the container of extra stars across the domed night. Robbie, an actual astronomer, brought his high-powered telescopes on the retreat, and they were aimed at Saturn and a ring nebula. They were stunning, so incredibly beautiful. I had never seen anything like them. The amazing thing, though, about Robbie's telescopes was that they moved as the night sky moved, slowly rotating to always keep their subjects in view all night. The telescope's movement was a reminder that our planet, is in constant motion, not just turning under our feet, not only circling the sun, but moving through the universe on a spiraling arm of the Milky Way. Some of us lay on the ground looking up, imagining that we were looking out of Earth's windshield as we moved through the universe at 390 kilometers per second. Most of the time we are oblivious of this movement, but laying there, I swear, I actually felt this subtle thrust of the earth lifting me up and carrying me out into that universe of stars. Now you know there's no up in space. Stars, galaxies, nebula are all oriented differently. Our sense of direction, up, down, east, west, is related to being here on this planet. So what does it mean for us that in today's reading, Jesus ascends into the clouds, goes up to take his place at the right hand of God in heaven? Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't do much to celebrate Jesus' ascension this past Thursday. The Ascension became an important Christian holiday starting around the 4th century, right up there in importance with Christmas and Easter. This was the dramatic end to the story of Jesus. Jesus leaves the world where his power was limited in time and place to assume his eternal, limitless role with God. We don't pay much attention to this holiday anymore. Catholics still observe it, and some Protestants do too, but for the rest of us, observance of the Ascension was eliminated along with many of the other feasts by the Puritans, and unlike Christmas and Easter, it just never came back. So what do we do with this story? What do we do with it now? What was so important about it? And can it still have meaning when we already know what is just beyond the sky? Well, first, I think we have to appreciate the power of this moment within the story, as it is the conclusion of the story of Jesus. Now, movement up and down is important if you have a biblical worldview. They believed heaven, the realm of God, must be just beyond the sky. Go up a mountain and you get closer to God. But instead, God sends his Son down to live among us, to try and reveal God's love to us. He becomes a great but controversial leader. He dies, but lives again to show that God was serious about this message that love conquers all. And thus, having finished his mission on earth, Jesus goes back up to God to continue to guide and intercede on our behalf for eternity. Not only does the Ascension answer the question, what happens to Jesus after the resurrection, but it gives the church a spiritual Jesus to whom it can devote itself for all time. Now, each of the Gospels deals with the ending of the story in a little bit different way. Mark ends with the Marys running in fear from the empty tomb. Jesus is risen but gone. Matthew ends with the risen Jesus meeting the disciples on a mountaintop in Galilee, saying, "And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." Jesus remains with them in some unexplained way. John ends with Jesus telling his disciples to follow me and promises to come again, though it never explains how or when exactly he leaves. The author of the Gospel of Luke, who also wrote the book of Acts, is the only one who tells the story of the Ascension. Now, at first, this ending seems equally mysterious and perhaps opaque. But I find that its drama reveals something important about God and something important about us. You see, even though we all know what is up there beyond the sky, we still long to be lifted up. Now, some of this longing might be gravity's fault. Every part of our body exerts constant effort to overcome 9.8 meters per second squared force that's pulling us down. But you add to that the yoke of life's disappointments, the pain and loss we carry, and pressure that comes from fear and shame and guilt, and it is no wonder, for as long as humanity has existed, we have dreamt of flying. Each of us knows intimately the names of all we carry across our shoulders, and so does God. Now, the human Jesus knew the burdens of living and promised a lightening of our load through God's love and mercy, saying in Matthew 11, "Come to me, all that are weary and carrying heavy burdens. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy. This burden is light." Jesus' ascension suggests that not only is he lifted up, but with him we are as well. So what is putting a spring in your step these days? While we might long to be walking 10 feet off of the ground, what are the more subtle movements of God's grace that you are seeing and sensing these days? For me, it's been music. It started back a month or so ago with the 1-year anniversary of Prince's death. We had the radio on, playing his music all day long. And more than just tending to the grief, it was just so great to have music filling our house all day. Megan and I looked at each other and we realized that we just don't play our CDs as much as we used to, or listen to the radio. Having the music on made us dance and sing throughout that day. As a result, we've been trying to have a song of the day in our house, something we listen to at breakfast to help us start the day. Now, our secret agenda here is, this is how we're trying to introduce Satya and Isa to our music. We played songs for them like "How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You," James Taylor; "I Feel Good" by James Brown; "Come Sail Away" by the Styx. I think perhaps we've already heard a couple of songs that could be our song of the day today here. Music lifts us up. It certainly lifts me up. What is the wind beneath your wings these days? What if the ascension is not meant to be seen as just a one-time event, not simply a peak experience for Jesus, but a sign of what God is up to all the time? What if God is conspiring in all things to free our spirits, raise our hopes, and take us to a higher place? Might it really be God's grace we are experiencing through that unexpected call from a friend, when humor breaks the tension in a room, through a touching story, or the beauty that surrounds us? How might we live differently with a renewed appreciation of the power of God's subtle movements? How might this awareness help us to lift one another up? Jesus' last instructions to the disciples were to go out and be witnesses in Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. Instead, they returned to Jerusalem, to an upper room, and it says they devoted themselves constantly to prayer. This response was perhaps not quite what Jesus had in mind. But then Luke often portrays the disciples as a little thick. And it's true, though, while we might dream ourselves of reaching some kind of escape velocity from our lives, in truth, we struggle to simply overcome our own inertia. But in those moments, when life gets you down, lay there for a moment and look up at the stars. Gaze toward the heavens and remember the universe. Everything is in motion. You are in motion. God is trying to lift you up. Amen.